Welcome to the Lazaro Lab. I'm Ryan Lazaro.
And I'm Matt Lazaro, and today we have an awesome guest joining us via Skype. It is Mr. Brian Sanders. He has a really awesome podcast I was turned on to by our producer. It's Peak Human, and also he's been working on this amazing documentary called Food Lies. And just a pleasure to have you on, man.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm glad to be here. I love talking about all this stuff.
Good. Yeah, man. Like I mentioned earlier, I looked at a bunch of your stuff, and I love what you're doing, and it kind of reminds me of a lot of things that really got me into the deep of looking at food quality and just making different choices that pertain to food, especially being that my background in just the weight loss community and sports nutrition just kind of led me to where I'm at now. But I really like, how'd you end up kind of down this rabbit hole, man? And it's a great rabbit hole, by the way.
It is. It's endlessly fascinating to me, but I got into it, one, because I turned 30 and I couldn't eat whatever I wanted anymore. So that was 8 years ago. And then the sad part is around then is when I lost both my parents. So that's pretty early, right? Being 30, lost both parents to these chronic diseases that, are just so typical in society, right? They're so typical, we think that they're normal. Mm-hmm. But what I figured out after doing all this research and why I started making the film is that it is not normal. It should not be normal, right? It's typical in today's crazy world, but it's not normal for humans to live like this, to have chronic disease, to have cancer, Alzheimer's, all the other things that we see in society. And I realized I could make some simple changes, and I did not have to fall to the same fate. And that's exactly what happened. I started eating differently. Didn't require like calorie counting or anything crazy. I didn't do much other than switch a little bit of the way I ate, and everything fell into place. I reversed all kinds of little problems I had that I thought were normal. It's like, oh, you're 30 and you just feel like kind of sick or tired all the time, or you get you get sick every few months, or it's like, oh, you just get a dad bod all of a sudden, and have allergies, or you have joint problems and get heartburn problems. And I'm like, of course. And then I realized, oh, all those went away. I was just eating the wrong foods.
So what ended up being the right foods for you?
Well, really, I just got rid of the processed foods. It's so simple. Mm-hmm. Now that I've looked back on it, people make diets so complicated. They have a million different names for different diets and all these different things. And what I found is there's this simple sort of framework that all good diets have, and they just cut out the highly processed foods that are the ones that, added sugar, refined grains, seed oils, these three ingredients. If you remove those, if you don't eat those three ingredients, you're actually not getting any processed foods, and you can't actually shop in the middle of the grocery store anymore.
This is very true.
So you end up just eating mostly whole foods, really, I'm just eating more animal foods. I'm just started eating more meat. I realized that meat was a health food. The mainstream has you thinking red meat's bad, and I realized that's insane. That's like absurd. There's all kind of different agendas going on these days, and throughout the decades, and there's just been a lot of misinformation around red meats, fat, cholesterol, stuff like that. And so I just started eating more of all that stuff that supposedly is bad for me, and everything got better. And then you realize, oh wait, they're lying. Hence the film Food Lies.
No, that's so dang true, man. I mean, way back, I think it was about 12 years ago when my son was born, was when I really came to realize that removing a lot of what you removed out of your diet was one of the things I needed to reverse a lot of the like things that were very autoimmune-ish, gut issues, skin issues, and joint pain, reactive hypoglycemia type of reactions in that sense. And I'm 38 now, and I'm probably in better shape than I was in my 20s. And the majority of what I do eat is a ton of red meat, and here and there, I do definitely eat some grains still, predominantly rice and stuff. And finally got my brother to listen because he was wondering why he had this
in denial for many years.
Yeah, he didn't believe me. I'm like,
Skin eczema and hives and
Yeah.
gut issues and things that I tried to just use Benadryl to.
yeah, nah, man. But so recently you went to Africa, right?
Yeah.
How was that? I mean, that's amongst everything that's been going on, was that trip different? I mean, considering COVID and everything, how'd that go?
Oh man. Well, it's interesting. They didn't have COVID over there when I went. I mean, they did. It was supposedly going around the world, but Tanzania just decided to not recognize it, and everyone was just living their life, and everyone was doing great.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there was no masks, there was no nothing, no rules. We showed up. I mean, the airport, everyone was freaked out and all that, and then you leave the airport and no one knew what it was, and
Wow.
it was just normal life. They had these vans that they're like 10-person vans. They have like 20 people in them. They're all jammed in on the ceiling. They're hanging out the window. They're doing their thing.
Yeah.
Just living life, and they're all good. And I think partly it's because they're healthier too. I think there's a misconception about Africa. I mean, I'm sure there's parts of Africa where they have really they're really lacking in foods in general, like desert type of areas.
Yeah.
When maybe they are actually desperate for calories, but they were not poor, desperate for calories, like wandering around the streets with their hands open. They were just eating whole foods. They can't afford processed foods and McDonald's and all that. They're just eating whole foods, and they all are in pretty good shape.
Nice.
So that's one interesting thing. But so that was in the city, and then we got out to the villages, and then got out to beyond the villages to the hunter-gatherers and spent time with them. And yeah, that was amazing. I could tell you all kinds of stuff. We went hunting with them. We went with the Hadza and the Maasai.
Oh wow.
And-
So they're both in Tanzania? I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
so the Maasai are well known to be in Kenya.
Yeah.
But they're also in Tanzania for sure. There's a whole area that's not constrained by a border. It's just the Maasai people
true.
have been there for forever, and it spans Kenya and Tanzania, and so
Wow.
Yeah.
That's can you go in a little bit about the Maasai and the Hadza? How do you say it? Hadza?
Hadza.
Hadza. I listened a lot or read a lot about them. It was fascinating in the sense of how they're still living, and they're how they're significantly healthier, and how people just end up better quality of life and lifespan. But I don't think very many of the people that listen to our podcast know.
Yeah, for sure. So this is how all these questions we're asking really cemented this idea of how not normal it is to be in modern society where everyone has all these problems. We were asking, like, do you have back pain? They're like, what are you talking about? Are you tired? What are you talking about? Do you have problems giving birth? What are you talking about? Do women have menstrual pains? What are you talking about? Like everything that we ask that is normal, they have none of this. They don't even know what it is. They're like, when we asked them about joint pain or anything, one person was like, oh yeah, I had that. And we're like, oh really? And they're like, yeah, like a rock fell on me. And I was like, okay, so you had pain for like 2 days because a rock fell on you. I get it. Okay.
You didn't wake up and feel pain.
Waking up saying,
No,
"Oh, my knees hurt."
No, and then we actually went over to Uganda as well, and we spent some time with the Batwa, which are the pygmies. And there was a woman who was said to be 120 years old,
What?
and her youngest daughter was 90, and both of them were dancing. They were jumping around and dancing. They did not have joint pain. They were
Wow.
not in wheelchairs.
Got a few things to learn.
Yeah.
Yes, they had 6 generations present in this tribe. So that was the matriarch, and it went down to a baby.
Wow.
6 generations.
That's amazing. And from a observational standpoint, is it are you led to believe that the reason that they're so healthy is because of just their overall lifestyle, their diet? Like what, a combination of it?
It kind of is a combination. I think the foundation is the food, that they were just eating whole foods, animal foods, like that was huge. Even just the people say, oh, they exercise a lot or they're out hunting and all that stuff. There's actually a whole book of, like, debunking that by Herman Poncer. It's called Burn. It's a pretty new book. He's a professor, in the U.S. and he's just studied the Hadza forever. And it turns out they don't actually expend very much at all more calories than a normal American. That's a misconception. So it isn't just that they are. You can't just make that excuse. Is what I'm saying. It's like, oh yeah, they're out there. Like, well, they're actually relaxing a lot. They're just kind of hanging out. The Hadza, their life is pretty fun actually. They just hang out by the fire. They cook the meat that they got. They actually kind of smoke weed. They get this bush weed. They're kind of they're just hanging. They're
Living
playing
it
music. They're singing.
And it sounds like how I am when I go backpacking. It's like I'm not going to go expend a ton of energy for no reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you just have a good life. I mean, if you were just backpacking your whole life, you'd probably live till you're 100. It's just a simple life. You're moving around. You're eating. Well, if you were able to hunt, and they're expert hunters and know how to acquire food very easily, and they're so like I said, it's a lot of things. So they don't have the stresses of society and dealing with bosses and traffic and stuff. But sense of community, purpose, all that stuff that we know is healthy for humans. They sleep, they're getting great sleep. They just knock out. We asked them about that, and so, but the baseline is that they just eat real food, and they eat a lot of animal foods, and they eat nose to tail. They eat the organs. They eat everything.
Yeah, I remember hearing about specifically the Maasai and how they would actually eat the intestines of a fresh kill, and even some of the actual some of the ruminants in the intestines of some of these animals. And I don't recall who it was, but I remember probably listening to a podcast about how their microbiome was significantly more diverse than ours over here. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not because of fiber, I don't think. Some people say it's fiber. The Hadza, they claim to eat a lot of fiber. We didn't see them eating really any fiber. The women were chewing on some tubers, but they were spitting out the fiber. And so they were, and the men were just eating meat all day. And I don't know. I mean, some people have different observations. We were only there for a few days. We don't know everything about them, but it doesn't seem like they were loading up. It's not like they had the Whole Foods market, and they're just like, oh, let's eat the rainbow, and we need our kale, and we need this. Like, they're just chewing on bones and meat, and chewing on tubers, spitting out the fiber. So I think the microbiome came from we did with the Maasai. We did eat the intestines. They made a soup out of all the entrails and everything, even the contents of the colon. Wow. We called it the poop soup.
Yeah.
And it tasted like that. It was gross. It was brown. It was just like diarrhea soup.
God.
But I drank it, I'm like, I gotta get my microbiome going. I felt great. Yeah.
You put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. And I probably had a much better microbiome since I went there. I never got sick. I never had a stomach ache. I never had the slightest problem. The whole time we were in Africa, we were eating the randomest, weirdest foods that weren't refrigerated. We were when we were at the Hadza, the first day we were there, they had this little animal. They had a little deer. It was a tik-tik, and they just opened it up immediately. Like, oh, hey guys, like, what's up? Welcome. Well, the translator, was translating, and they just split it open. Gave, had this dirty knife. It was covered in intestines and all kinds of stuff. Obviously, it's never been washed. They don't wash anything out there. And the dude just cuts part of the liver, and it's on the knife. The knife has green and yellow intestines and all kinds of stuff on it. And I just take it and eat it. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm part of the crew. And I eat the raw liver. Felt great. Never felt better since.
Oh, man.
And so that's why they have the good microbiome. Like, these women they're not even eating the fiber. Like I said, they're chewing on a bunch of unwashed potatoes or, whatever, tubers, and they're eating dirt, basically, right? That's where you get the microbiome from. And you don't use hand sanitizer. That's how you have a good microbiome, is not trying to sanitize yourself every 2 seconds.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. So in their population that you saw, I'd assume that you didn't observe any disease necessarily?
No, I mean, not in the ones that just
Not the ones that we have here, at least, right?
Yeah, the ones that were just out there doing their thing, eating the real foods. We did actually, once you get in the villages, you see the disease because they rely more and more on the processed foods and the modern foods or too many plant foods. There was this village we got this thing together called the Tribe of Elders. We set it up with our guide, and I had this great lady, Mary, who went with me, who helped set it up. And she's like, okay, we'll get all the elders from this area and we'll talk to them. And it turned out we got a whole bunch of farmers instead of hunter and gatherers. And so it's a whole bunch. So we saw the healthy, 120-year-old lady jumping around. And then we get to the farming village where they're relying mostly on corn and some grains and, bananas and a lot of this stuff they didn't have much animal nutrition in their diet. And they did kind of look like the American elders, right? They were the ones that were hunched over. They had canes. They were like creaking around, like bad knees, that whole type of thing. Like looked like they just were in bad shape, bad teeth. I mean, these Hadza, Maasai too, amazing teeth. No dentist, of course. Absolutely never heard of a dentist. No orthodontist. No braces.
Wow.
They were beautiful teeth. And this all goes back to the nutrition and Dr. Weston A. Price. If you ever,
I have that book, man. That I don't know what it was called.
Nutrition and Physical Degeneration.
That's what it was. My buddy's a chiropractor. He gave me that book a long time ago. He said, "Read this."
A life-changing book.
It definitely was. I think they're the Price Foundation. They're a little more into fermenting some of your legumes, lentils, and all of that, and some fermentation with the grains and stuff too. Just a little different process. But you have what you refer to as the Sapien Diet. Is that right?
Yeah, basically it's after all these years. I mean, it's only been 8 years that I've been in this world, but I've gone full time for 4 of those years where I'm like every day, all day on it. That's what I found to be kind of the truth to everything, like the theory of everything. I love simple theories of everything, right? Where everything comes together. And the Weston Price stuff is really integrated into that. Like, what is the Sapien Diet? It's what do all good diets have in common for all around the world and throughout history, past, present, everywhere. It's the same thing. They have a foundation of animal foods, nose to tail, eggs, fat, organs, seafood, all these things. People from disparate populations all around the world, they all figured out the same type of things, and they all had the same type of diet. And they had all these traditions around pregnancy, even where they would give the women the liver and the most nutrient dense parts of the animal and give them extra meat and all this type of thing. And what they left out was also equally as important, is they didn't have the 3 things I mentioned: the sugar, the refined grains, and the seed oils. So if you can tell me any diet around the world, like say the Hadza, they didn't have the sugar, refined grains, and seed oils, and they did include animal foods in their diet. And yeah, they had some plant foods. Who cares? Like that's sort of just a baseline of just calories to have, chew on some tubers or find some whatever pumpkin leaves they were eating. But really the foundation is the animal foods. What you leave out is the processed foods, those 3 ingredients, and you have health. And so that's what the Sapien Diet is based on. It's based on everything I've ever learned, all the books, all the traveling I've done to different countries, and it's always the same. It's always the same, and it's always different, right? It's always different animal foods, and it's different plants to supplement, but it's always the same formula, that if you leave out those 3 processed ingredients, then you're okay, and you rely on the whole foods and the animal foods. And that's another thing. Nutrition, Physical Degeneration is an amazing book. It's all been proven out, basically, is what Weston Price saw. So he went around the world, and as soon as they got those 3 ingredients come into their diet, their health suffered immediately. And he saw this everywhere, and that's what we see too with, say, Native Americans. Like, they were super healthy. Now they're most susceptible to type 2 diabetes and chronic disease because they're getting a whole bunch of these processed foods into their diets, and it's killing them, really.
Yeah, definitely, man. I mean, just from firsthand experience and then working with clients and getting them to remove these easily accessed calories, I always feel like that's probably the predominant thing. I mean, would you say that the problematic reason because of those three main foods, your refined carbohydrates, extra sugar, and refined oils, is it that? Because just as from my observation, at least, is that those usually when you have them in foods, it's significantly easier to eat a lot of it, or just go unchecked with it.
I love talking about this stuff because there's so many sides to it. And I think there's multiple aspects. So that's one, absolutely. And there's even the flavor, the added flavors. I read a book called The Dorito Effect. Interviewed the author Mark Schatzker. Great stuff about how all these fake flavorings trick your body. And throughout history, eating really tasty foods meant you're getting a whole bunch of nutrients. And now eating fake tasty foods like Doritos are nutrient devoid, and they trick your body.
Yeah.
And so you want more, but you're not getting any nutrients. And so, there's a hyperpalatability argument, which is kind of what you're saying is these cheap, easy to get calories are everywhere. And I think what might be even more important is the satiety aspect. So that's lasting fullness. And I think this is really big for why people can't lose weight, or how people can lose weight or lose fat specifically, right? Most people want.
Yeah.
When you want to lose fat, a lot of people lose weight and they go on a vegan diet and they're like, I lost 5 pounds. You're like, oh yeah, you lost 4 pounds of muscle.
Yeah, that's always. I feel like when I help people lose weight often, and when I have clients that come in that are insistent on being plant-based, a lot of times the only time I'm willing to work with them is if they're saying it's for religious purposes. It's like, well, I'm not going to change your mind, about your religion. So we'll manage, but they always tend to struggle more than the people who are actually more willing to, focus on animal-based proteins as a majority of their staples and stuff, and remove a lot of those processed foods. Hey, you sound like you obviously do a ton of research. Have you heard of there was a study, I don't know, more probably this year or last year about it was on sugar, and they blindfolded the people, and then they numbed their taste buds essentially, and then had them had the control not actually have sugar, but then they were giving sugar, so they couldn't taste the actual sugar, but they still wanted more. So even without knowing that they were tasting sugar, they were actually still wanting more of it, because there was some type of signaling being sent to the brain that, hey, this is sugar, so let's get more. I just found that interesting because of most of the refined or processed foods, you're going to end up with some sugars in there, even if you don't taste them.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I don't know if I've heard of that specific study, but this is the type of stuff we brought up similar studies in the book. The film. And this is kind of, we mentioned Rob Wolf before we started recording, I guess it was, and he has a book called Wired to Eat. And this is kind of touching on that principle that, throughout history, humans have these things hardwired into our brains to want the sweet, sugary calories, because for all history we needed calories to survive, and it made sense. And yes, we got some honey, and the Hadza, we got some honey and we ate it, and it was great. There wasn't that much of it actually, but it makes sense evolutionarily. And right now we're in this constant state of pure honey everywhere. It's like the biggest, like the number one honey score of their year mixed with the number one berry, if they found a berry patch score of the year. We're living every day like their best day.
We're living our best.
That's how everyone wants to do it. Everyone wants to live their best life, and just eat tasty foods every second.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem. And back to, you're talking about the plant-based clients and stuff like that. They have the hardest time. I think it's a lot of that is that satiety thing that I was bringing up, right? That you're never going to be full. You're not going to have lasting fullness. True satiety is lasting fullness on plant-based foods. They have to eat every couple hours, and you're never getting enough protein or nutrients because plants just don't have full, complete bioavailable protein or nutrients.
No, not at all. And it's Man, that's always like an interesting talk, especially when people are coming by and asking, and just just general questions that roll in about that, because it's so trendy, right? And there's such a push in this plant-based direction, and even it's so weird that it's even rooted as like this being proposed as if it's better for the environment. That's the thing that drives me nuts.
Oh, it's insane. It's insane. And that's the second half of the film. Or maybe not half, it's the last third of the film where we debunk all those arguments. And there's really not a leg to stand on when you look at the vegans have three main arguments. It's the nutritional, the environmental, and the moral. And they actually, it's funny, they always shift the goalposts. Whenever you debunk one of them, they'll kind of move to the next one. But I can debunk them all so easily. I know all the arguments. I've heard them 1,000 times, and none of them hold up when you look into the actual science, and you have to dig past the normal mainstream stuff, right? Because the mainstream stuff, this is also what I found, is just how much of it's all based on big industry. It's so much of it's just big pharma, big food, all these big interests that are continuing the failed science that we've debunked that is 50 years old. Or why does this stuff continue? It's because they're making a whole lot of money. And why does the mainstream not know about it? It's because that's the whole plan. The whole plan is to keep people thinking that calories matter. Oh yeah, just eat the 90 calorie packaged food, like that's healthy. It says healthy on it. Like, my God, I don't care about calories at all. I care about the quality of the food, and I've never had to think about calories. If they're trying to pitch you, that it's low calorie, that's a good reason to know you should not eat it. And look at the ingredients. I did a popular post on Instagram counting ingredients, not calories.
Yeah. I mean, because the fewer ingredients, generally, it's more generally, depending on what it's from, it's more nutrient density and stuff. So more
nutrient, and it's a whole food. Yeah, I mean, you can just eat whole foods, and
it is. The solution is very simple. I would 100% agree. What do you say to people that are just reluctant overall, but they're still struggling over in that sense? I'm just my curiosity is like, what do you say to people that they're willing to make changes, but they're not willing to make that dramatic of a change yet?
It's super hard. Yeah, it's a journey, and I didn't make these changes overnight. It took me years and years and years to finally get there. Because I mean, I love to eat pizza, and you know what I mean. It took me a while you have to learn enough about why you shouldn't eat it. Or part of the problem is it's not like you get fat and sick the day after you eat pizza.
Depends how much you eat. No.
Yeah, I mean, yes, you could definitely be bloated and sick to your stomach. But
no, I get what you mean, though.
No, man, yeah, it just, part of the cruel irony to it all is how long it takes for these problems to develop, so you don't know it. So yes, it's hard to convince people to change because you don't see these changes overnight. So you have to learn a lot about the long-term effects and why you're doing things, and then you have to change your habits a lot and just understand and enjoy this new lifestyle, right? And that's what I'm saying. It takes years. It took me a while to figure out how to cook really great foods that are better than going out to restaurants. I think that maybe was one of my biggest turning points when I found the meals that were so good that I could make it. It really did take me years to either perfect the cooking methods or the ingredients or the combination or the seasoning or whatever, where I could drive by a great pizza spot and I'll be starving and I just won't care. I won't try to pull in. I will go home and be like, oh man, I got my steak. I got my special, I got my truffle salt. I'm going to salt it up and get my cast iron. I'm going to do my, onions and mushrooms sauteed and some butter. I got my avocado and I have my special ranch seasoning I put on it. That's my own good seasoning, not like a bogus,
hidden value.
And so I have the whole thing, and it's not hard for me. It doesn't take willpower to eat this way because it's truly enjoyable and delicious and better than what I could get at a restaurant. Then you start saying, like, why would I go to a restaurant? It's like, I'm going to pay like $40 for some steak and some whatever that like is not even big enough, or like, you know what I mean?
It's always disappointing.
I mean, I get it. yeah, I get it. Like, I'm going to go out to eat with friends and go to events. But I mean, I just don't have the desire to go otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I'm quite the same. You know, the only time I actually go out to eat is when my wife is insistent on going out to eat, and then I'm like, all right, fine, we'll go and we'll just get whatever she wants. But do you not deviate at all? Like you?
Oh, I deviate. I'm a guy that is really realistic with people, and there's some people that are really into being super dogmatic about everything and all this crazy stuff. For me, but also it's because I've worked at it for 8 years and I was never in such a bad spot before that.
Yeah.
Some people are in a bad spot, right? And maybe they can't mess around, or maybe I like to tell people, it's not like you're never gonna have pizza again, but let's just hold off for a year.
Yeah.
just like
let's make some changes first.
Yeah, you had like 38 years of messing around in your life.
That's true.
We're going to have sort of a strict year, and then we're going to be able to have some pizza once in a while because you've done the work. So, also it's about your average. Like, your diet, quote diet, is really just the average of the foods you've eaten over, say, a month. Right?
Yeah, I
so
agree.
Then in that course of a month, if I had pizza once, that's a very, very small, small amount.
Yeah.
Fractional, right? And even like, say, seed oils. Seed oils are bad because they're highly processed and they have a ton of omega-6 fatty acids, right? There's a linoleic acid, and there's all this science to show why this is bad, especially when it's oxidized and you're frying in it. So if you have a handful of fries once a month, it's not great. I'm not recommending it, but I do it. I have some, like, once in a while.
Yeah.
Because I know that there is a ratio of, say, omega-6s and omega-3s, or the polyunsaturated to saturated to monounsaturated, these fatty acids that are okay. I mean, we need a couple percent of the PUFAs in our diet, but ancestrally we would have like 1 to 3%.
It's very, very small. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 to 3%. So people eating seed oils all the time, they're in everything. All the processed foods have seed oils in them. All the dressings are pure seed oils. All the fries are everything fried is seed oil.
Yeah.
So people are up to like 20%, and in their tissues, like, they've done studies and they find that some people have 20% PUFAs in their tissues, which is really bad. And that there was another study that I think up to 80% of calories from fats were from these polyunsaturated fats, which is like very bad. So I'm saying, let's get back to ancestral levels, 1 to 3%. So that's why I'm not insane about it, because if I have, some kind of food once a month that has some in it, I'm still going to be in that 1 to 3%.
Definitely, man. No, I agree. It's funny. I was extremely strict for years just because I felt like I needed my body to heal. And then the further along I progressed and the better I started feeling, the more I felt like I could tolerate periodically eating the quote unquote fun foods, and I do it once in a while still too. And it's definitely not as frequent. And it's exactly what I try to encourage my clients to do, rather than just solely rely on, managing your just only calories, because that's where things get a little weird. Otherwise, you're just doing. You remember when eating fitting Pop-Tarts into your diet was a thing? I mean, it's probably still a thing, but if it fits your macros, not and the bad part is it works, right, for a lot of people. But the other bad part is I think they still represent a very small percentage of the population.
Yeah, the really disciplined people, and it can work for short periods of time, and it doesn't take into consideration long-term health. It doesn't take into consideration gut health, autoimmune issues, all these things. I'm well aware of this world. I've interviewed Lane Norton on my podcast. He's one of the big macros guys. Yeah, I interviewed him a long time ago. We get into some wars online sometimes. People tag him in my stuff, and
that's funny.
Vice versa. It's a whole thing. But I get it. I actually just spoke at this coaching power athlete is John. I don't know. It's this Austin gym, and this guy had this whole thing, and all these muscle guys were there, and they're like, "Yeah, bro, it's like it fits your macros, calories." Like, yeah, I get it. I get it. You're a gigantic guy who's probably on steroids that works out like 3 hours a day, and you can crush M&Ms and Top Tarts. I get it, but you're not thinking about the rest of the world. You're not thinking about metabolically damaged people with autoimmune. You're not thinking about satiety even. Like if you're not crushing those workouts, you can't just eat that many calories, and you have to worry about satiety and how you're going to be hungry. That's a battle that most people face, is a battle with hunger, right? If it was easy, then everyone would be thin. If calorie counting was just about counting calories, then everyone would be thin. Guess what?
Yeah, I agree.
88% of people are metabolically damaged and unwell, and it's because all calories are not the same. It's almost proving it. That all calories are the same, and that you can't just arbitrarily make a diet plan on paper that's a low-calorie diet and then attempt to stick to it, because you can a little while. People can last a little while, but what happens is you only have so much willpower. And I said in the beginning, I'm all about the satiety aspect. Like, I love thinking about it, why calories are different, how they affect you differently, and why it doesn't work. It's because it's not focusing on like nutrient density and or protein and or satiety, which I think a lot of those are almost interchangeable. That satiety is basically a measure of protein and nutrient density of a food.
Yeah, I mean, it's
right?
it's pretty evident. Yeah.
Every time eating steak, that's like, well, also protein. At least these guys like Layne Norton understand that protein is king.
It is,
and that you can't just make a random calorie counting diet and then have it to be low protein. You're screwed. You have to have that protein high enough to work to fit your goals for satiety. It's the most satiating, macronutrient, and it has a higher thermogenic effect of food, the TEF, and takes more calories just to burn it or use it. And so you have to account for protein. And then I do see their point, because if you do account for protein and you're eating a lot of protein, then you can sort of fill the rest up with fat or carbs or both, and it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, but the thing that I always think about and is, I grew up on the pretty poor side of town, and the one thing that we always see now in throughout the country, it's like the healthier people generally are more well off financially, and the lower income areas are extremely unhealthy. That's where there's higher density of diabetes, heart disease, and all the above. And I always think, like, what I used to also, I hear the argument where it's like, hey, processed food is cheap, but in reality, when you're looking at how much nutrients you're getting per ounce of meat and stuff like that, you're still actually at a very low cost point. It's just there's such a lack of support in that overall to give actual support to that, to where people are hopefully going to start making those changes. Otherwise, they're still living on top ramen and God knows whatever else.
There is also other costs associated with eating the top ramen, the cheap foods. It might seem cheap temporarily, but then your health care bills, your health should be your number one priority, really, your long-term health. And also even just actual cost of food. If people are eating these cheap, low quality, hyper palatable foods, then you're going to end up just buying more snacks later, because you're not going to be properly satisfied, satiated. You're not getting enough nutrition. So I don't think my diet is very expensive at all. I think a lot of it is, you're talking about the lower income areas, that it's about the education. There's a lot of other stuff going on that if they knew that you could eat ground beef and eggs and be healthy, then maybe they'd do it. There's this problem. There's so much messaging around it, or different programs that would serve the wrong foods, that you're kind of screwed. But if you realize that you can eat ground beef and eggs and be healthy, and you don't need much else, and you could throw in some other, get some white rice, absolutely, buy a sack of rice, buy a couple fruits or vegetables or something, whatever else on the side, and you have your ground beef and eggs. It's a great diet. That's cheap. You can eat 2 to 3 meals a day, be super full, get a ton of protein, and it's not expensive.
No, it's definitely not. It's almost, I mean, basically fighting against just general propaganda that's like promoting all this, crap food. Basically, I mean, that's really what's going on. At least from my view, I've been doing this for it's like 18 years in the industry now. So it's like, okay. It's very fascinating to watch this kind of continue to unfold the same way it always has to a degree, and especially with the internet, it's just easier to see everything now.
Yeah. Oh, that's big part of the film. It's find the propaganda, find the lies. It's all, like we were saying, big business. It's tough.
Yeah.
Didn't Instagram ban natural immunity as a hashtag, right?
Oh,
I saw
man.
your post on Instagram. That's why I
Oh
wanted to
yeah,
bring
he
it up.
sent it over to me.
Sad day for science. I said this is a sad day for science. I mean, this is the type of thing that's going on. And I'm right now they're censoring stuff for the sake, they do it under the guise of safety for the public, and it's, for the COVID stuff. I'm already seeing, and I'm scared for the future of them censoring stuff about meat, about healthy food, because it's going to go against the narrative, right? And I
Yep.
think the next big thing, I've heard a lot about this, is the climate change push. They're going to say, hey, meat's
Yeah.
bad for the environment. You can't eat meat. We got to eat less meat. You see it everywhere. They're already having these big, the UN and WHO and the Eat Lancet, and they're like, oh, this is a diet for humanity. This is a diet for sustainability. 14 grams of protein, they were saying. 14 grams of meat in their diet.
man.
It's insane. It's absurd. So guess what's going to happen in the future? Oh, you went against our guidelines. The WHO says that red meat is bad for you. You posted about a steak, censored.
Yeah, and it's
This is a realistic future.
yeah, I agree with you on that, and it's really disturbing, especially considering the intellectual dishonesty that it's being pushed with. It's like it's not rooted in any actual, what we would consider legitimate studies. Like if you take any other branch of science, like in math or physics, and try to, produce the same the results based on purely observational, nothing else. Especially like when they're doing these studies on red meat, where they're taking these essentially like a food log for they're just saying, hey, over the next 15 years, kind of tell us what you eat, and they're just literally just saying, oh well, I eat a hot pocket and this, and that's considered red meat. I'm like, well, eating a freaking hot pocket's not considered red meat. That's the way I eat it, and the way the general population is eating it. It's like that's absurd. Down to even when I think it was the what was it, the FDA? Not the FDA. The food guidelines started changing about saturated fat. I think it was like a couple years ago. They removed their recommendation of how much saturated fat
limit,
was actually a thing, But yeah,
No one knows about it. They
No.
removed the limit, and they cholesterol was not a nutrient of concern anymore because they were scared of cholesterol for so long. And then they didn't tell anyone. There was no big press conference about it.
No.
And
Yeah, because they're for years they've been pushing that fat is bad for you in any form.
they don't want to be
Yeah.
wrong.
No.
They don't. They want to admit they're wrong. They just quietly change it, and they have all their big interests. All the people funding the studies, all the people funding everything, doing the lobbying, lining their pockets, are all in that food industry. And it's super obvious once you see through a lot of these things.
Yeah. What do you think has to change overall to get the general population? Because, there's subsets and just outliers. And I'd say, I'm in a giant training facility, and we have hundreds and hundreds of people that are consciously making these positive decisions in their life. But that literally represents like less than 2% of the entire population of the United States. And so I always just wonder, like, what actually has to change to get things to change on a macro level, a larger level.
Yeah, I think we're trying to do things on both sides. I think it takes change from the top. Like people like Nina Teicholz, she wrote a great book called The Big Fat Surprise. She has something called the Nutrition Coalition, and they're working to change the guidelines. So they're out there with the lobbyists trying to, say, hey, look at this study. This goes against everything you're saying. So she's out there trying to change the guidelines. And I think those do need to be changed eventually, because that does, even though people say, oh, they don't follow the guidelines, no one follows the guidelines. We do. For one thing, since the guidelines came out, we've eaten less red meat, eaten less fat, less butter, more whole grains, more vegetables, fruits. And guess what? We've gotten sicker. It's been rising ever since. So we have followed the guidelines. And also, those guidelines dictate the nutrition program for schools, nursing homes, military, all types of things.
That's true.
So it needs to change from the top, but it also needs to change from the bottom. People, just more movements. Just people from your local gym to just Instagram nutrition communities, like I try to do. If people understand the difference in their diet change and how great they feel, then they tell their friend, and then they tell their relatives, and then it kind of catches on, and then people start, buying these certain foods, and you have to use their own tricks against them, which is money. And I've seen this happen even in the last few years of me just making this film and interviewing different people and different ranchers and stuff. And they're saying, hey, I got approached, like some big rancher with a big regenerative farm, 5,000 acres, doing things well. He's like, they approached me. Big food companies have approached me to get regenerative, meat in their line, or to ask how for consulting so that they can do some stuff, because it's for the wrong reasons, I guess. It's so that they can sell more product, or they'll put a label on it that says grass fed, but maybe at least it's pushing in the right direction, because if people demand more grass fed meat or better meat or more, just whole foods instead of processed foods, and the market shifts, they want to make the money, so they'll put more focus on it.
That's very true. I remember when, a decade ago or longer, when Rob Wolf was talking about the difference between grass-fed beef and stuff, and I remember how much just a pound of grass-fed beef was back then was pretty significant, even just for a fairly 80-20 percentage. It was, I remember it was like maybe $10-12 a pound, and nowadays it's maybe 30% less. So the demand, when the demand's there, these corporations only care about money, right? Like, so it's I guess just getting the overall the more masses to want that, to ask for it enough to where they're going to end up wanting to provide it. So I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and getting films on Netflix, which is my whole goal.
Yeah.
People buy into it so much. They're like, oh, did you see The Game Changers, or what the hell?
Oh my gosh.
Right? Like, you have these bogus films that animal rights activists make, and they can change the course of entire population. And I've ran into so many people, because it's all I talk about. So I do end up talking about this type of stuff with way more people. So many people that, oh man, I went vegan because of Game Changers. I went vegan because of what the hell. And then they always have the story of, oh yeah, it was terrible. I felt terrible.
Yeah, that 99% of them, they've all said the same thing, and I just, oh man, I cringe when people. I try not to, but I cringe when they bring it up, because I know that they're just generally concerned for their health, and I'm like, yeah, man, okay, look, I get why you're concerned, but your approach has no merit, because it's not backed and it's not provable that that's the reason why. I mean, generally, man, some of the things that they were referencing were just completely absurd. But it's funny. It's like, well, okay, like if you ate just less in general, even if you weren't accounting for food quality, when you go to a plant-based diet and you're eating massive amounts of fiber, you're probably going to eat less for a while until you're just your gut's all wrecked, and the next thing you know, you're just constantly looking to be satisfied with something. And you're,
well, it makes sense. I get it. Yes, they can lose weight, and it can feel better initially because they are eating less. You're right. They're eating less without even trying, because the food's so low quality. You can eat nonstop and never get enough calories. And so, yes, on accident, they are eating less. Not on accident, but it's almost like just a satiety principle where they just, it's just so, but it's just not nutrient complete, and it's not sustainable, and it's not human.
No, I agree, and it's just the fact that they're contributing their weight loss, and it's usually just weight loss. We don't usually see massive improvements in health conditions. I mean, at least from what I've seen, unless someone's like severely diabetic and now they're less diabetic because they ate less. I mean, that's definitely a real thing, but still, it's like you're contributing the positive things to the lack of meat, and that's not necessarily what's happening. So it's like you can enjoy your damn food. You know, you can eat some steak every day practically, and you know, I've seen it in clients that they're eating whole eggs and meat, and they're worried about the cholesterol. And I'm like, when they go in and check, and their lipids have improved overall since before they came in, it's like, well, see, it's not what you thought.
Or yeah, well, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, is the LDL story. And I always say that yeah, I've seen it a million times that everything gets better, actually, except for the LDL. So that's a separate story. But their HDL gets better, their triglycerides get better, and those are the two things that matters most, I think, when you're looking at simple blood lipids, is the triglyceride to HDL ratio.
Yeah.
And that always gets better when people switch to whole foods, animal-based type of eating. Man, your HDL goes up, which is a good thing. Your triglycerides go down, which is a good thing. And that ratio gets closer to 1-to-1, which is what you want. And, you know, sometimes your LDL goes up. But I mean, I work with a doctor. You know, we get it. And so...
Are you referring to the difference in the particle sizes and everything with LDL?
Particle size, or just, it's just even, LDL is just not even what we think. I think
I agree.
LDL is actually kind of a good thing in the right context if you're eating the right diet, and it's not, like small dense particles and, you know, like these oxidized, inflamed, you know, type of thing. Then LDL, I think, is an indicator of kind of immune health, and that it's kind of a thing that helps. We just have a whole misconception about LDL.
Yeah, the whole cholesterol thing is just wild. Like, I always encourage people, like, hey, just look up, do your research on Crestor, like what happened with that whole thing in the Jupiter study. And it's like you're not reducing any, you know, heart disease. You're not reducing any risk factors in terms of reducing your cholesterol via medication. You know, it's funny because I think they were at one point working on something to increase your HDL, and it ended up like being pretty detrimental to people's health. And so they were like, well, let's go with decreasing your LDL, and that, you know,
it's what works. It's what they had a drug for. So they went with that, and they tried to they made trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And
sorry,
there's a lot to it.
There's a train driving by. We forgot.
Good.
We're literally inside of a giant train facility. It's like 60,000 square feet, and right, one of the big doors is open in the back, so there's a little train that comes by sometimes, but we forgot to close the doors. I'll blame the producer. No. Yeah, so man, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you're a busy dude, man. Was there anything you wanted to add?
I mean,
there's probably a lot.
What's that?
I said you could probably talk about this forever.
I could go on forever. This is all I think about. I work on the film every day, and we cover all these topics. So to cap off that cholesterol discussion, I've interviewed 3 cardiologists, Dr. Brett Scher. You can look up these Peak Human podcast episodes. I'd just suggest listening to my podcast, Peak Human, because it's a huge resource. People find a lot of value. They start back at episode 1. It's like a whole nutrition course. Nice. I choose only the best doctors and scientists around the world. And I've interviewed a lot of great doctors about the LDL and the cholesterol topic, so you can learn more about that there. There's regenerative ag topic we touched on, that why it's, you know, eating meat's not bad for the environment. What's bad for the environment is actually eating a whole bunch of conventional chicken and pork that are, you know, just stuck in like giant warehouses. So I don't really eat much conventional chicken and pork anyway. All beef is really on grass for the first 2/3 of their life, and then, you know, so beef is always the better option, better nutrients, better everything. I guess I'm trying to recap a lot of things right now, but yes. So there's environmental side, there's the nutrition side. We even debunked the moral side. I'm just thinking back to the part where I said that the vegans have those 3 arguments. More animals die growing crops,
especially those monocrops.
Oh man, yeah. I've talked to ranchers, farmers. They get killed in many ways, from being chopped up in the combines to being starved to death. This is one I didn't know about. But if they're, I mean, if you have a big field of corn, you have thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of mice and other animals that are reliant on those grains and the corn and whatever. And then you cut it down, and then they all starve to death.
Oh
They
wow.
slowly die. Yep, this is a lot of ranchers or farmers, not ranchers. Farmers tell me about this, and they
Huh.
have documented it, and they slowly starve to death.
Wow.
So
I had no idea.
you can have
yeah.
10,000 mice starve to death, or you can have one cow bolted in the head that dies instantly.
Yeah, it's very weird how one is more of an issue than the others.
Yeah, well, that's just human. Well, the vegans, they want to like kind of hide in their by not confronting the death, and so they feel morally superior because they don't eat the animals directly, even though there's lots of animal death associated with their food. It's very convenient for them,
Yeah,
but it's just not true.
It's actually, if I remember, it's in the billions, right? Annually. Is that right?
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's way more. I don't know if we're killing billions of cows every year, but
Well, there is billions of livestock animals. If you're counting chickens and pigs and
Yeah.
cows, yes. But yes, it could be in the trillions if you count all of the smaller animals that would die growing plants and crops. If you're getting down to, tons. There's ground nesting birds. There's baby deer. There's, insects. Then it's definitely in the
Yeah.
trillions.
Oh,
You're
yeah,
displacing
you're right.
animals. You're killing foxes and different. There's so much death associated with growing
with
plants.
vegetables.
Yeah. So I guess that was my recap, is that the vegans have no leg to stand on. We're covering this on the film. I covered it all in my podcast. I could talk forever about this, but
I love it.
yeah.
We could have you on again for sure.
Yeah.
Only when the film comes out.
Yeah. How
I don't-
long? How long do you think till the film comes out? It sounds like something I really, really want to watch.
Yeah, we don't have a date. It's going to be next year. It's just a slow process. We don't have the funding that the Game Changers have. We don't have James Cameron and his $140 million worth of pea protein stocks he owns. And
Oh yeah. Conflict of interest much, huh?
yeah, he's got a lot of interest in pushing that stuff. We have a couple guys working for free, so
Yeah.
we don't know when it's going to come out.
Hey, well, I'll try to get the word out there, man, because it's we need more people like you.
Let's do it.
Well, yeah, man. I think we're a little over an hour. I got to get back to working, and I know you got a lot of work to do, but I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day, man. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
See you.